Good day, my name is Ken Lasseson. I wrote the Microbiome prescription website, and today I'm doing a video in request for somebody who want to have a beginner's guide on how to get list of suggestions. So we're looking at this person's sample. This person has a condition, and most people have conditions. So usually when you have a condition or multiple conditions, in this case she has several, you want to determine which one is the highest priority and first work from there. So in this particular case, the person's condition is long COVID, which is usually recognized increasingly as a microbiome dysfunction. Two of her other conditions also are usually viewed as probably microbiome dysfunction. So she started before COVID with existing dysfunctions, and COVID just kicked her more over into a undesirable space. Okay, so after you have uploaded your sample, and I have separate videos on how to do uploads on samples, so we end up seeing this little light here. Some things are grayed out, which are things which you need, for example, multiple samples. You need 2 samples before you can do multiple samples. So we have a combination here. The person has entered symptoms, and usually the first thing we do is get a general feel for what's going on. And for doing that, we're going to go over to MyBiome View. It is a good introduction to the microbiome. Before we go there, notice that we have 680 taxonomy. Taxonomy is a fancy name for bacteria. We have 680 bacteria involved or identified. Taxonomy or bacteria family can be viewed very much in human terms because it is a equivalent to humanity as continents, countries, or in some cases intermediate. We have a combination of countries which forms, for example, NATO or the EU, and then we have the countries, and then within the countries we may have states. Within each state we may have counties, and within all parishes, and within each one of these we may have one or more towns, cities, settlements. And then once we get into a city, for example, or even a town, we may have areas or districts or suburbs or whatever which are part of the area. And then we go down further, and we may actually get down to the street level or down to the individual house level. So we have the same type of hierarchy happening in the bacteria as with mankind. It's important to keep in mind that it's very similar, and I will often come back to it as an analogy to understand what it is. And like civilization, like humanity, it's complicated. You have different clustering of people or countries to seeking specific goals, and they can disrupt or support each other. So let's go over to the MyBiome View, and after a second to ta-da, we have it, and now you can see we have 680 items listed there, which is a good saturation. Now, if you are new to the microbiome, you're probably saying, huh? Wait a minute. This is overwhelming. In one way it is when you first start. But there are a few things in here which you're probably familiar with. For example, let's take the name. Let's look for Lactobacillus. And down here we see we have Lactobacillus, which you probably know named from probiotics. And they have exactly we have one genus in which we have a particular species. Species is usually the lowest rank in the taxonomy. This is called rank or organizational level. So we have exactly one there. So this is how much Lactobacillus. Now you may say, wait a minute, the person doesn't have enough lactobacillus. Okay, let's stop for a moment and take a look at what's on the line. Right here we have how much they have. Here is the range for what is deemed to be quote normal. Tronde is low, high 6,500 and 6,500. Sorry, 65,000. And you start saying, huh, what is going on there? I mean, I'm low. I'm nowhere near that or whatever. And what we have over here is we have what percentile they're ranking. And they're sitting at 45 percentile. We also have here comments. And sometimes things can be a little bit interesting because there may be a condition associated with it which you are not familiar. In this case, we have something to lactobacillus, which means that some of them can be pathogens. Not all of them, but some of them. But none of the ones which are the next level down are pathogens, so you're probably okay. Another example up here, Streptococcus, which you probably know. You have many different types of Streptococcus, one of which is associated with tooth decay, but you have a low level, which implies that probably not there. And the reason we use percentile rather than absolute count or average, which often you will see on lab result, is because it just doesn't work properly. I'll give you an example by flipping down and looking at a particular one. So what we have here is one of the bacteria, and here we have the distribution and goes from 0 to 100% of people. And you notice that it's sort of rough at the beginning. We see the low normal sitting down here. So if we load that, you are calculated to be deficient. Here we have high normal, which is here. If you have above that, you are deemed to be abnormal high. And what we have here is we have where this person sits. So the person sits at the 60th percentile. So they are in the normal range of people. Just sort of anywhere along this flat line is normal, which accounts for some of the variation. Now, if you go and work with averages, which often labs do, sometimes because you don't have a high quality statistician on staff or they haven't been given time to do their homework, you see here's the average. The average, given all the values, is way up here. And the result of the averages being way up here is that anybody who is, most people will be reported to be below average, and given the wrong advice, then you need to increase this particular bacteria up to that. The reason I'm particularly concerned about this one is it is associated with the presence of mycotoxin. It feeds on mycotoxin, so it is an indicator that you may have issues with fungi and other mycotoxin producers. And if you even look at labs that provide you with standard deviation, as in a range, and if you don't use the cutoff multiply, but use a standard bell curving, here's where high level comes way up here, way above the span, and where does the lab low here? Almost there. So what we have is we have a difference of opinion to what levels of bacteria. Here is what the levels being used on this side using the cutoff multiply transform, which creates a beautiful chart. But if you go over and look at its percentage, you don't see it. This information disappears. What you end up with is a line like this, just about 0 here, and right here, which is where we have high normal, is where the numbers takes off massively. Notice that it goes up to, some people are almost 100% this bacteria. And where we had the lab high, 50% of the gut is the bacteria would be deemed to be in range, despite the fact that 80% of people have practically less than 1%. What is the number down here? Yes, less than 1%. 80% of people have less than 1%, and suddenly you have 50% and you're still normal. There's a problem there. So be very careful with the lab charts. It can be so horribly wrong on ranges. And if they don't show the distribution, and show the distribution with appropriate transform like the cutoff multiply thing, then they may just be providing numbers for the sake of numbers, and the numbers they provide are to make you feel good, but are really, really not helpful. Okay, time to get off my soapbox and get back to the chart. Okay, so here we have this page, and this page is relatively rich for information. And well, what it's rich for is, one, it shows you where things are. It will flag things which are out of range, which is there. Over here you can go and you can click on this little chart thing, and I'll do that right now. And it will open up and show where you are on the chart. And as you can see, this is another one of these charts. Absolutely flat, and then it takes off, and you are definitely high. But again, we have this oddity of the average, which many labs report. This is the average, being well above the range, which is seen, not just calculated, but seen visually as the cutoff range. So big concern there. So now let's go back and take a look at the other thing we have here. Is we have the percentile here, we have the chart here, we have a visualization, but also we mark it as blue, indicating it at high, something you want to put on ice, as in blue ice. And we have pink here, indicates something which is too low, something you want to put fire under, red, pink for flames. So I'll go and click here, and I'm going to actually look at this bacteria. Every bacteria is hyperlinked, and the purpose of the hyperlink is to allow you to walk the data. So here it gives you information about names. And what we have here is we have how often people report having it, and what we have is that Thrive is the only one that reports on it. Nobody else reports on it. So it's sitting there, and it is seen in about a quarter of people. The charts we show are for people who report it. It's the standard that most bacteria are not reported. So, or ranks are not reported at the species level. So we have there, and we have a association of it with depression. So this is there. If there were PubMed studies where we were identified as being significant, it will be listed there. And down the bottom, we have the very helpful section of what will increase or decrease it. And we have things that include things like a herb, so it would filter out to herbs, vitamins, prebiotics, probiotics, amino acids, and flavonoids, and it will say over here how many studies reported it. The more studies, the more confident we are. Sometimes studies will have contradictory results. So seeing how many studies reported, positively or negatively, is important in terms of decision making. And we have 3 studies here, the returns, so that probably means that, hey, that is probably going to be something on the list. Okay, so let's go back to this page. And what we're going to do first is we're going to literally handpick which bacteria we're going to work on. And what we do is we simply go through the list and do some eyeballing. And that is a bit of a time consumer, but it sometimes produces very good results. And we first of all, we take a look at things which are pink in low, and everything which in pink is low. We had to make a judgment call. You're almost 16, we're at 15. Is that really abnormal? It's borderline. And borderline lows, we usually say, nah, we're not going to include it. We're just adding noise to our ability to focus. We go down, we have more here. And we go down more, another one. Again, we have low values. And there, and the other thing we also do is wherever we see a line here, we check to see what the numbers is. It may not be identified as statistically high, but if it's a high value and it has adverse conditions associated with it, we may want to include it for that. Now we go down and we have another one. Everything's good. And here we have the copria, which we saw before. Over 70% is indicated a mycotoxin being present. We had 59, 60%. So we are fine. We are in the range. And if you remember, the curve takes off suddenly, and we're well below where it takes off. So we are not close to it, which is good. Again, if you're not sure, go over to the chart, take a look at it visually. Another one, we have more bacterial ones. Again, all of these are low percentile, so not particularly concerned. Nothing there. Here we have a not healthy indicator, and it's at 90 percentile, and it's there. So I'm going to go over here and click this checkbox. This one is also there, but the question is it known to be a problem or not? From the side comments, it's not known to be a problem by itself. The key is these are things by themselves. Other cases, things can be a problem in combination. So we don't have a clear problem here. It's high, but we are not going to do anything about it because it's not abnormally high. Okay, here we have another one. We have there another one, and then now we have another one here which is high. And in this case, the genus is high, but the explicit species is high. There, and to go over here, if you go over here and click here, we see where the information is coming from, and you can go and do readings if you want to get more information. So that's it. Another one which is high, but again not statistical. As you can see, the numbers are just as neuron numbers, and these numbers are out of a million. They've been scaled to be always out of a million. So you're talking about 640 people in the city of a million are in this group, or have been classified just by ethnical group. For example, I think it could be people from Tonga. And there's no known crime or economic or other characteristic associated with them. So although we have perhaps more than most cities have, there's not an issue with them to be worried about. Another one which we have low, this one, it's approximately 3 times low. I would probably, without much difference, be inclined to include it, but that's borderline. That one we have high, and here again, this one is a bit touchy, but it is marked as high. We're not that far above the high level, and technically I would go over here and look at the chart. To see where the high levels are. It's there. Flip over to percentage to see what it looks like. Lab high, and we are sitting here. I've always been kind of included because look, everybody is low. Although you're not quite across the line, you're getting close enough to the line. And the line here is a gentle sloping line, so it's probably be worth including. And let's go down. Getting nothing there. We have not half a predictor, but 31 percentile. We have items which are low. This one is sufficiently low. 300 versus 2000, so that's almost 8-fold below. This one is half. Let's go for try to keep things to fractals, which are 3 times or below the low level. And nothing there. I just flip to make sure I didn't miss anything. Nope, nothing there. Nothing there. Oh, here we have another pathogen, which is at there, and our level is 14,000, and the range, healthy range up to 3,000. We're nowhere near the unhealthy range, so we can ignore the 76%. Again, we have some more here. We have, again, we can mark one or both of them. Remember, this is a hierarchy, so in this case, you see these numbers identical because everyone in this genus happens to be the same species. In other words, they are all 100% Swedes. There's no Swedish Norwegian in this community. So this could be Scandinavia, and this could be Norwegians, and all of the Scandinavians happen to be Norwegians. Same type of logic. Okay, I continue on. Notice we still just going through it at one time. And here we have another one, not happy predictor, so we mark this one. Another one, not happy predictor. And let's go down, see what's there. And we have some more ones here. Again, we can mark each one of them. And continue onwards. Continue onwards. No problem there. 15 and 16 there. And we have the last ones here, which are high, and particularly two are high. This other one is sort of just a tag along, and we're well high. Okay, so I've gone and marked all of the items of concern. Now I'm going to go to the top and click this button, and it creates a special subset for analysis of just these bacteria. So if I click here, oh, now I'll go back and you see handpicked bacteria. If you want to see what the list is of handpicked bacteria, go here, and it will give you a nice table showing all the handpicked bacteria. There's 15 of them, and all of them listed. You can see what your value is, your percentile ranking, and we have 25%, 75 above this maxing. So it gives you some feeling for where you are in terms of the numbers. So you can go through and check if you want to take something off, which you looking at the numbers, say, wait a minute, I perhaps shouldn't have included that. You can just uncheck the box and then click this button and we'll update it. So this is the first walkthrough, knowing nothing about the person thing. It's just saying, okay, let's just look at the bacteria by itself, or what we do know with it, which are specific to particular bacteria, and things are abnormal. Things, again, in the human analogy, they could be things like the incidence of DUI with a particular ethnic group or economic group, for example, percentage of DUI of people who are who are software developers. Could be actually very high. After all, they're under a fair amount of stress, and they drink. Some of them drink a lot, and from personal observation, oh yes, many software developers do have alcohol issues and are probably a bit reckless and do have a DUI. So if you have a bunch of software people coming on conventions to town, you may have a higher incidence of DUI, and you may want to have more spot checks of people's alcohol content when they're driving. Again, it could be the clustering, could be by ethnic group, could be by job, could be by other characteristics, and all it indicates is increased risk. It's not predictive. It doesn't say because you're a software developer you are going to be a drunk and drive drunk. I know many software developers which are absolutely do not drink alcohol at all, or for that matter, don't eat meat pizza. There are good Hindi software developers. So the taxonomy indicates that something may have higher probability of something happening. Does not mean it's guaranteed to. So it is what I'm comfortable with, some people are not. It's dealing with probability. Okay, so let's go back, and we always have this little button sitting there, makes life easy. There. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go to Handpick bacteria, and I'm going to first of all get suggestions. For many people, just maybe all you want to do. And there we have this suggestion is Handpick. A bunch of things disappear from this choice list because everything is Handpick. And what we're going to do is I'm going to change that to use all the kitchen sink, which means I don't care what level it's at. If it's high or low, it's taken into the calculation. Most of the time, you want to filter to which neighborhood or which town or which county the incident is happening. You don't want to look everywhere. Some cases there may be a problem which is everywhere, like in human terms, that's one example is number of kids coming to school hungry. Okay, and go through, and we have a bunch of things listed there, which we'll come back to later. This is the default screen. We have some things pre-selected and some things not. Things like antibiotics, antivirals, most people don't have direct access to them, so it doesn't make much sense to do it. We have some other things which are there, which hasn't been classified into this clustering of things. And we can say how many items we want to show. Okay, I'm going to increase it to 30, increase it any number you want. And the items are filtered by the probability of them actually helping your microbiome. And it's a probability again. I'm a training statistician, so I eat, live, and breathe probability. So most people don't. And unfortunately, or fortunately, for me, fortunately, everything dealing with the microbiome is probability and statistics. Not absolute. This will fix all your problem. If I hear that, I go, okay, that's nice. That person has religion. I have science. Okay, show suggestions, new window. I'll go through, and it will now go through and list out the things the person should take. The confidence level here, I should explain, is this is based on combination of the number of studies saying it shifts one of the bacteria. And which bacteria are we doing? If we go up here, we see all the bacteria which they have selected and criteria for selection. And you can now go back and again double check the chart if you're unsure about something. So what we have here for confidence is this item affects some of these in the right way, and the number of studies that shows it affects in the right way increases the confidence or decreases the confidence. So it is a combination of how many studies showing it impacts these items in the right way and the number of studies. So it's sort of a complicated aggregation, and not saying, okay, it's not saying my school history book says that this happened. It is going through and saying, okay, we have just school textbook, we have 15 other books, let's read what everybody says about it, and there's going to be different perspectives. And some people can say, wait a minute, that's mythology, that is somebody who redacted history, this book from 20 years earlier says something different, etc. And now you need to sort out what are you going to accept or believe about a historical event. The same thing here. And we have, hence we end up calculating the confidence level. So the confidence level is there. And what we have beside it is this little magical thing called dosage information. And the reason dosage information is there is because most of the time when you say, okay, you need to take something, people go and take something, but they take it in a dosage which is far below what clinical studies have shown is needed to be effective. Let's take a look at vitamin D. And I'm just going to open this in a new link. And what we have here is we have clinical studies with the dosages they used. And we have here actual studies where it was done and they were trying to test something and the test whether or not they got results. And here we have one where it was effective at 1500 daily. Here we have one where it was 500,000 as a single dose and it was ineffective. It didn't do the expected response that was expected for what was trying to be measured. And here we have people trying different dosages. So what we have is, if you take a look through here, you find that what dosage should you take? Well, probably these 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, 30,000 in a week, divided 30,000 by 7. That's for about 4,000 a day. And then we have short-term high dosage. So you can read all about the studies here, how long it goes. But you can now ask the nasty question, how much is the right dosage? And that is nice to do because you will now have more confidence you're actually going to change. Just saying, okay, I'm taking the recommended daily allowance for vitamin D. That's nice. That is probably, I think, it used to be just 50 IUs, or 50 UIs, sorry. I think it's now up to 200 UIs. And historically, that 200 UIs is the level which is defined to be sufficient to stop having rickets. Not necessarily to be healthy, just enough to not have rickets. So these higher dosages are not a surprise to me. Okay, let's go back and take a look at the thing. So now we have things listed down here. What they should take, wheat bran, certain types of sugars. Over here we have things to avoid. And the reason we want to avoid some things is quite simple. These substances will cause high bacteria to go higher or low bacteria to go lower. Hence, you want to avoid it. And in this case, we have the stuff there. One of the things I usually try doing, and with our next analysis of the same sample, we'll see it, is try to keep things at 0.4 or above. In which case we really don't have that much. What we do have is we have a particular probiotic you want to avoid. And we have down here one amino acid, cacao, hot chocolate every night, ma'am. Hot chocolate every night. And then down below we have commercial probiotics, which goes and attempts to list out which probiotic which is available off the shelf in retail store are likely to do the best thing. And over here we have ones which you should not be taking because they will again shift things in the wrong direction. One of the aspects of probiotics is that there are combinations, often strains, which means some strains will help you, some strains will hurt you. And we have a dilemma because sometimes they don't even give you the quantity of each, and we don't know how powerful one strain is going in, or one species going in a direction, and the other one, there's no comparison studies available. So it becomes a little bit of there. So we have positive impact, which means there's no adverse effect that we are aware of in these species in this probiotic. Negative impact implies that there is nothing but negative effect. And then further down, we give the choice of showing mixed or no impact. Mixed impact is some will help, some will hurt. Usually you don't want to take them because you are basically taking some dice and tossing it and seeing if you get snake eyes. And no impact is right here, which means that we have no information on these. If you're taking one of them already for some other reasons, keep taking it. There's no reason to stop it. And then we go more further down, oh boy, we end up with a section called flavonoids, which indicates flavonoids. Flavonoids are in food, and here we hit a little bit of having to do a bit of wiring together. There are many studies of bacteria and the response to flavonoids. Okay, flavonoids are, well, a lot of time people say, okay, that's a flavonoid. I have no idea what food it is in. So down here we have the flavonoids here, things which are food which will have a positive impact in terms of food groups. Makes it easy to start working on diet. And these contain amount of Fav Noise it has. There may not have been an actual study with phenol. There may have been a study with the flavonoid, which is dominant in phenol, in which case phenol becomes added to the list by inference. And over here we have things, again, we have vitamin D showing up. We have resveratrol, which is a mast cell stabilizer here, and other things. And actually, many of these you actually will find on the list up above, somewhere, fenugreek. So that's it. Again, this one doesn't produce many items. It only produced 3 to 4 avoids on the budget to take. I should point out one little bit of interesting show. Resveratrol was shown on the bottom. Quercetin is here. Often the two of them are sold together in a mixture. You don't want to do the mixture because you again growing crabs. One will help, one will hurt, and it's going to be snake eyes or boxcars. We don't know. Snake eyes means two. The die rule comes out to 2. Boxcars means 12. So be aware of the avoid because sometimes that can be a critical factor. Okay. So this is process 1, and the numbers here are not. You don't have a good list. I like to have a good list so that you are likely to do things. So method 1 is done, which is more time consuming. So if it's too time consuming, you can go direct to method 2, which is what I'm going to show you next. Method 2, we go back to the samples. And changing your microbiome is listed here. And we could go for a quick suggestion, which is by just simply clicking here. And it will automatically do it. And it uses the ranges that a naturopath in Australia advocates, who is well respected around the world and in many of the alternative medicine community. He is a lecturer dealing with the microbiome and probiotics. He has some sites, and so these are the levels which he wants to see, and we simply use his ranges with his permission and works on there, and now we come up with a group. And you can see the numbers are much higher here than the other one, and then we have things to be avoided over here. So we have cacao here, so we actually have a different set of bacteria, or most of them are not the same on the ever list, but what affects this set of bacteria has overlaps with what affects the other set. And words, we have keyword consensus between the two sets of suggestions. Here we have old friend cacao, we have resveratrol showing up again. Burdock roots made it on this one, it was to avoid on the other one. Again, you will have contradictory suggestions. And there we go. So that's suggestion number 2. It's quick and clear. Notice that all these confidence levels are below my usual cutoff point of 0.4, so we can say forget it. And then over here we have things which are there. We have barley, wheat bran, soy, inulin, and I just say, hey, guess what? My usual breakfast is barley porridge with a bit of wheat bran and inulin mixed in. So what I do as my regular maintenance diet for my microbiome happens to be close to the suggestions coming from here. And so there goes. Now things like wheat, if you have a gluten sensitivity, you want to skip. So these are keyword suggestions. These are not prescriptions. These are things you should consider. Some of them you may want to discuss with your medical professional before starting. In fact, generally my suggestion is figure out what you want to take, print out the list, walk into your medical professional and ask them to review it in case there are any items on there which they could have concerns about. And more importantly, then technically you doing these changes under medical supervision, which is a good situation to do. So that's the second way. We go back to our samples. And you would see something, this thing. This is consensus suggestion, which I will come to at the very end. It means we have done two sets of suggestions, and we have them being stored. So we can aggregate them and figure out, taking in every approach, what are the best things to do. And if you do a click down, you will see the ability to clear it. So if you want to start again, you can see what the suggestions is. This list the consensus suggestions, and we even have a video on how to use the consensus, because that gets it gets a bit time consuming. Everything about the microbiome gets time consuming. Okay, let's go back to here, and we have the count of Motrop, which uses only the items which are extreme high and low. And here we go again, and we have walnut, inland, barley, wheat. All of them are there, and which bacteria are picked. Those are the ones which are too high and too low. We include every too low here in the list, and away we go from there. So we have this suggestion done, things to avoid. Again, we find we only have one thing over a 0.4 threshold, and we have a bunch of things on the avoid. For example, quercetin, which was to avoid from our list, is here again. Glycerin. Key thing is different bacteria, or not quite the same bacteria, but different combinations, but still the same action or desire for log to be done. Okay, and now I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to the third way of doing it. The third way of doing it is going to advanced suggestions. And I mentioned this person has a condition. This person, condition of highest concern is long COVID. Yes, our little friend of friend. And if you go down here with advanced suggestions, you first get a lot more choices on screen. And we'll go down and we look at long COVID using PubMed studies. And I should go and explain and show you what that means. If you go over here into reference, into library, PubMed conditions. These are conditions where there have been multiple clinical studies done showing which bacteria are high or low connected with a particular condition. As you can see, there is a lot of them. And long COVID we have here. So if I go and click on here, we'll see the studies which were used to do it, and there's a couple more to be added. And if you go over to long COVID and we go and open this one, these are the bacteria which have reports of being shifts high or low, and which article they come from. In other words, there's a lot of bacteria shifts seen with long COVID, many of them which are reported in many studies. That is a good long list, even though it's just 4 studies. Many of them reporting the same bacteria multiple times, which is actually good. And sometimes you will have contradictory results. For example, we have 2 reporting high and 1 reporting low. And the reason is that the population the studies were done on could have other characteristics, like study was done in China where the main diet is Chinese oriented food, probably very little Western diet. That one could be done in Arkansas, which perhaps is a little bit heavy on the ribs on the steak every night and tend to have higher incidence of obesity. So there's a whole bunch of different factors involved, hence contradictory results do happen, and there's fuzzy logic in the system to try to do it. So basically we have candidate which suggested food, we have a whole bunch of other things here listed there, and that's there. But let's go back to where we were, which is we selected long COVID, and what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and we are going to just go and click. Now I've done no explicit selection. I have no idea what we could come up with. So I'm going to just click here. We get suggestion. First thing I do is I open here and see if we have at least 10 items. We don't have 10 items. In other words, That's nice, but we are sparse on the number of bacteria you want to change. And when you see how many bacteria associated with long COVID, you definitely want more than 10 items. So no luck there. So I'm going to go back and change my criteria and to actually, let's go back into where I was. I've gotten myself confused. It happens, so don't be concerned if you get yourself confused. So we go back to advanced suggestions. And what we're going to do is up here is count of motrop is the most restrictive. It is the finest gradation because it separates things based on statistics only, where things are clearly abnormal. Some people say, okay, if you're in the top or the bottom 3%, we should do something, or top 6 or 9, etc. So we have the ability to include more bacteria in it. So I'm going to go up to 3%. Again, we're going to go to long COVID, excuse my clumsy manipulation here. I'm going to also make life a little bit cleaner. I'm just going to close those tabs. And now I have long COVID, 3%, the usual criteria here. Let's see what we come up with. And what do we have? We have more bacteria. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So we could go there and we can see that we have 3 items there. 2 lone pathogen, which means we really don't blow. So we have our suggestions now. Barley wheat, that keeps showing up. We can now go back, and if we want to, we can go and bump it up to 6% and open suggestions in a new window. And we have, how many bacteria do we have now? We have a good number of bacteria. Most of them are too low, a few are too high. Again, we have things called barley, walnuts, whole grain barley. We have the similar things. So we have done multiple things here. We can go and take a look at commercial probiotics. Again, we have the same thing down below. This commercial probiotics is reduced because of the more items being factored in, and the no known impact one and the mixed impact. Okay, so at this point in time, you say, okay, so I have a whole bunch of suggestions. What do I do? Well, we've done 6 sets of suggestions. And what we can now do is do a view of consensus. And what we have now is a horribly big page with lots of things. And here we will notice that we can sort things by there. So if you click here, double click, you see things which are the top, the best take. Now, in other words, every single consensus we did has, perhaps not on the screen, but somewhere in that list. Because this looks at everything on the list, more than just the top 30. Every single time, this was a recommendation. Almond cream, whatever that is, barley, oats, blueberries, etc. So basically, having done 6 samples, I would basically go and consider everything on the list. The net impact is here, which indicates there. Some of them have site negative things, so although they recommend it every time, occasionally they show up with a negative aspect. The ideal ones to add to your list are the ones, if you've done 6 set suggestions, are 6 and zeros, because you are absolutely safest making those suggestions. Safer takes are next, and what we have is, again, by clicking here, you can do there. Often I do prefer counts because it's indicating a number of times suggestions, so this is the suggestion. And we have 5, and there we have the take and avoid, and generally the take is higher than the avoid, which is why it's a safer take. But there's some negative risk to it. Here we have barley here. I believe we have whole grain barley up top. Again, it all depends on what the study used. I try to keep absolutely faithful to what the study actually stated. So barley and whole grain barley are actually two different things. One is milled and one isn't. And the milling process changes things slightly chemically. Plus, again, different studies and different types of people. And then we have likely safe. Again, these are things which are more often suggested to take than not to take. We have free and free, but same number of take, same number of avoids, but the weight for taking it is more than the weight to avoid. Hence we got likely safe. I should get that spelling. That should be safe, not save. And then we have the high risk, and these are things where you should definitely avoid. And we go down here, and you see occasionally gets things like, oh, wait a minute, that's a probiotic. In some cases, that's a probiotic you're taking, which is making things worse, probably. And then down here, and the same aspect as above. So it just goes and lists things there. Massive number of items listed because a massive number of items were evaluated. Again, keep your life simple. Take count is better than avoid count, and avoid net and take net are like the first couple here. Those are the easy ones because you are dealing with absolutely lowest risk of having a thing. May not always be feasible, and in some cases you'll find the same thing or something very similar by name between the two groups. Okay, so we basically have done the basic generation of suggestion, which is the full and complete scope of this talk. I have other talks which goes into other things. There are other ways of getting through suggestions. I'll go and just show right here because it's sitting there, which is there is a way of getting suggestion using the genomes of the bacteria you have. I'm personally revising it because I discovered I can improve the logic, but you will find here is you will find the AI suggested probiotics. If you click here, it will go in and list off by weight which probiotics you should consider taking. And this does things a slightly different way. We look at what enzymes are being produced by the bacteria there. Not which bacteria are, but which the enzymes, and often the same enzyme will be used by dozens of different bacteria. And we calculate out where you seem to be deficient in certain enzymes, and then we go over and look at the probiotics which produces those enzymes and say, hey, you're not getting enough of this particular enzyme, and this probiotic produces it. Logical is to provide the enzymes via the probiotic that produces it. So this is sort of a more obtuse or inferred way, but it does produce some interesting things because it makes suggestions which are not based on something having done a clinical study. And back here we have the one other thing underneath here, and we have suggested supplements which follows the same type of thing. And in this case we have other things being suggested. I think L-glutamate was on some suggestion list. Again, these are not aggregated with the others. They come from a totally different method. And that gives you the list, and you can adjust this one saying, okay, I want, let's say it's just top 3%, and you find the highest ones. You can adjust those up and down. So those are additional chunks of suggestions to incorporate. Again, anything suggested here, you should check your consolidated list, see if they show up there with any others. The main reason is this is calculated from genes alone. The other ways are calculated from clinical studies. And often there is good agreement, occasionally there's disagreement. Generally, I favor clinical studies over gene calculation. But if there is no clinical studies, then the best choice is using gene calculation. It just gives you a reasonable logical model for it. Okay, so that is it for my walkthrough of how to get suggestions. I'm sorry it's long, and there's a lot more on the site. We have just scratched the surface of what is available on the site. Okay, that's it.